Hi there, I'm David Hill and I am the Senior Technical Marketing Architect for VMware's Cloud Services Business Unit, vCloud Air. We are now going to look at how you can perform a planned failover. In the previous video, we showed you how to perform a test failover, but that doesn't modify the virtual machine in any way, and replication continues while it's being tested. When you perform an actual planned migration, this stops the replication to vCloud Air and moves the virtual machine permanently to the disaster recovery site. There are a few steps to follow as this is a planned failover. We are knowingly failing this virtual machine over to vCloud Air. We are going to want to do a quick synchronization to make sure all our data is over in the cloud. We will then start the failover process, and part of this process is going to be choosing some of our actions as we go. So we will be checking our network connections and IP address selection. We will be performing some of the basic steps that we performed when we did the test failover, like powering on the virtual machine and validating the virtual machine has connectivity to the network and the internet. We will also look at some of the failover considerations, which we will cover in more detail in another tutorial. But there are things you want to think about. Things like additional networks for your virtual machines running in the cloud, Active Directory and where you will run it in the event of a site failure. Lastly, going back to the IP addressing, I'm going to be using DHCP by default, but you may want to change that to a static IP pool. For the purpose of this tutorial, we will leave it as DHCP and we have it all pre-configured that way. There is an option where you can perform a failover in the vCloud Air portal in the event that your site has failed, and we will see that as we progress through this video. Let's take a look. So now we're going to look at how we actually perform a full failover of a virtual machine from an on-premises vSphere environment out to vCloud Air. So this is where the virtual machine is no longer running in your data center. It is literally failed over and running out in the public cloud. So we start by going into the vSphere replication plugin, and we select the monitor button to actually go in and look at the replications that we're carrying out in our environment. So we click that monitor button and we can see in the outgoing replications that we have a VM TM test 01. So this is the virtual machine that's running in our vSphere environment that we're replicating to the cloud and we want to fail over. So we check a few settings. We make sure that our point in time instances are available. We see that how much data we have and the times that we had to fail over. We check the status is okay, and we can see that our last sync size was 5 meg. So we know that this is running. We then click the Run Planned Migration button, which is different to what we did in the previous tutorial where we did a test. This is actually going to stop replication and power off the virtual machine in our vSphere environment. So we click the Planned Migration button, and this starts the Planned Migration wizard. And we have two options. We can synchronize recent changes, which allows us to force replication. So any data changes of this virtual machine would actually go and be replicated out to the public cloud, out to vCloud Air. Or we can select a point-in-time instance, where we can actually select a previous instance that we could recover to. For the interest of this demonstration, we're actually going to synchronize the recent changes. So we're going to force synchronize all the changes that have occurred in this virtual machine since the last replication, because this is a planned migration. Now we have two options. Do we want to gracefully shut down, or do we want to power off the virtual machine? Well, it's always recommended to gracefully shut down your virtual machines rather than force a power off. As this is just a planned migration, we'll specify that we do a graceful shutdown, and we'll force it to do a guest shutdown using the VMware tools. And then we'll say power on this virtual machine in the cloud once it's finished. So now that we've clicked OK, let's look at our current tasks that are running in vCenter. And we'll see that we have a task that's showing that we're actually synchronizing the virtual machine. So we're forcing the replication, we're running the replication for this virtual machine, and we're performing a planned migration. So this is actually powering off that virtual machine, stopping the replication and powering it on in vCloud Air. So we see we now have a status of recovered for this virtual machine. So what we'll do is we will check that this virtual machine has actually powered off and it's no longer running. So we click on virtual machines and we'll sort our virtual machines by name. And we can see that VMTM-DR-Test01 is actually powered off. So although it still exists, it's no longer available. So we'll go over to vCloud Air and we can now see that that virtual machine, DR-Test01, has a recovery status of recovered. So that means replication is no longer in place for this virtual machine. We can see that the replication status is showing as recovered as well, and when the last completed replication point was. But we will get no more replication data from this virtual machine from our on-premises environment. Now we go into that virtual machine and we can see that the status is powered on. So we'll open a virtual machine console because we want to make sure that this VM has connectivity and that it's failed over correctly. So we'll log in to this virtual machine and we'll do some basic checks. So we open up a command prompt and we want to make sure that this virtual machine has picked up an IP address from our IP pool. So we can see that it's got an IP address on the correct range. And we'll do some basic ping tests out to the internet to make sure that this virtual machine is connected and running successfully. Now we can see here that everything's running fine, that we're happy with this virtual machine, that it's failed over correctly, and that all the services are now running out in the public cloud. So one of the things that I want to check is that the IP address that it got on the recovery network is in the correct range. So we can see by looking at this network that our IP range is 180.20 and that we've picked up an IP address from there. So we know that we failed over this virtual machine. It's in a recovery status showing recovered, and we're happy that this has failed over and it's all running in the public cloud. Now that we have actually failed over that virtual machine to vCloud Air, let's take a look at how we do the reverse and we fail back that virtual machine to our on-premises vSphere environment. You can watch that and other videos at vcloud.vmware.com/tutorials. Thank you for watching.